Bakhtiari is still available for the left guard spot, and he claims to have a lot of gas in the tank yet. Why wouldn't he be a great renter guard for the Vikings?
The Bakhtiari obsession continues almost 24/7, and you don't have an answer for it.
Well, my answer would be there are enough left tackle I assume he meant left tackle, not left guard, but there are enough left tackle starved teams out there that if he was believed to still have anything left in the tank, that he would have been signed by now.
Do we think they're doing they've already, so in other words, they've probably already done their due diligence on
Yeah, and I wouldn't be surprised if an offensive lineman of some sort is brought in for depth purposes, but like the idea that there's a left tackle out there that they can go trade for or otherwise acquire is just, that could be, learn the system and contribute right away is just farcical.
Kevin Seifert writes for ESPN.com and also occasionally appears on ESPN, although not quite as often as Courtney Cronin. Man.
She does work.
Fast rising star at ESPN.
No the question. Hardest working person there.
Crazy.
Like, I credit her for that.
And Louis will be with us, not in studio, at about 5:30. Also, circling back to O'Connell's comments with PA today, O'Connell specifically said they need to get the play called and executed quicker with more time on the play clock. Now, does that allude to some of these pre-snap penalties that they're not getting in position soon enough, and that's reducing their margin for error on those rather costly penalties?
Yeah, I went through, and it's not delay a game. I think they have like the third most delays of game, delay of games or delays of game.
I think it's delays of game. I think.
Okay, yeah, like sisters-in-law. Yeah, and so. But I went through and added up the total pre-snap, with illegal formation, illegal motion, offensive offsides, false starts, all those, and I think they are third in the league with the most, third most in the league of those type of penalties. So that definitely has been part of it. But I think that if you just this is the delay game thing in particular has been something that popped up a lot in 2022 in O'Connell's first year and his second year. So I think there's been a common thread there. Which means mostly it's just not one person's. This is not a Sam Darnold thing. It's an operation thing. It's probably some of O'Connell's, interest in which has been productive in giving quarterbacks tips right up until that 15-second mark or 16 or whatever it is, 14 seconds when the microphone cuts off on the play clock. But, their inability to kind of line up quickly, call a play, and go has been something that is not just a this year thing.
Do we have any particular reason to believe Jordan Addison when he says, "It's my brand, man. I've been doing this for years. You guys, you jackals, are always looking for an angle. You're always on the lookout for my injured dog. I'm tired of it, but there was no sort of ulterior motive that I'm not getting the ball enough, or I feel like I'm not being focused on enough." I don't believe him. Do you?
I don't have any reason to think that he was intentionally trying to publicize his dissatisfaction with the offense or his touches or his targets. And I know people can say, well, he's been around. It's his third year. Like, he's not a rookie. He's a high, big time college player. He's got to know what people are going to think. And I'm like, yes and no. There's some people who I think just post things and don't necessarily think through what it means. And I talked to some people behind the scenes, and there's been no indication that he's on like a table screaming about and upset. That said, O'Connell himself has mentioned publicly, I think he did it today with PA, that they got to get him going, and that they got to really look for ways to get him the ball, because he is a really good player, and I've said that since the moment he got here. And he can add to your offense, and it doesn't have to just be Justin Jefferson for 14 targets to get Jefferson the number of passes he needs, and you can spread it around, and the Hockenson return is going to probably it'll create another mouth to feed, but it will also spread the field a little bit better. And so I think that they're well aware that he's been underutilized as a first round draft pick this season, and he has been hurt for a couple games, but he's healthy now. And I think that there's a sense that, if they want to kind of, put the accelerator on this offense, that he's going to be a big part of that. And so I think that what I'm saying is I don't think that he's screaming and wants to trade and he's really voicing this great dissatisfaction. But I do think it's understood throughout the organization that they can get a lot more out of him.
Speaking of health, a couple people asking whether Green Dot Guy is going to be back. It's the green dot, right? Not the blue? Or is it green?
Yeah, for Blake Cashman.
Blake Cashman. Because I heard the quote from the head coach, which was, I hope so, but that doesn't really tell us much because he hoped he probably had him back 2 weeks ago. What do you think?
I mean, it wasn't ideal. Monday is like an hour-long, very light, kind of just get moving again type of practice, and he was not there, and he had to go to an appointment, I guess, to get evaluated.
Or treatment or something?
So, treatment or evaluation or update. And so I know O'Connell's optimistic about it, but like he's got to practice tomorrow, what you would think, if he's going to get back out there. And he also said something, as part of that optimism is like, we're really focused on making sure he's healthy, which to me is kind of the code for like not getting him out there, not putting him out there when he's like 70% or something.
That makes some sense. I'm a little skeptical of the belief that we can, like the 80% of the regression of this defense is that Cashman's not out there. I think that's a little, I don't know, that seems a little high. I think there are a lot of other issues that have kind of reared their heads. You tell me.
It's not all
he's
of it,
important.
It's part of it. And like the way, and you were talking about like the 8-9 yard passes, like that's where that's his wheelhouse right there. You got like, you can have Ivan Pace blitzing or Ivan Pace doing something near the line of scrimmage, and you've got Cashman back there. There's lots of things he can do, but what they talked about from the day they signed him was how good he is in pass coverage, instinctive. He's either knocking balls away or hitting guys or defending them in ways that they're not even going to get targeted. He's really good at that. And I do think that they have missed that for sure. Is that the reason they gave up 30 points, 30 plus points 2 straight games?
After averaging 15, giving up 15.
No, but like that's like if you made a list of the 5 reasons, that would certainly be up near the top.
Do we have any concern, John in South Minneapolis wants to know, or should we have any concern about Gilmore? We all know about his bona fides. We all know how great a defensive player he's been, but are we seeing some slippage? I remember when the Vikings got him, I texted Tim Collishaw. I said, give me a scouting report. Has he got anything left? And he said, well, he's got a little something left, but towards the end there, it got a little bit ugly in Dallas as well. So are we seeing some, regression here in his case, or what would you say?
Like I felt like he was like, there was no reason to think he was like still the defensive player of the year type player.
From the beginning. Yeah.
From the beginning, he was available for a long time, and is, getting into his mid 30s now. And so there was a play, he's had some great coverage, like the Jets interception that he made
to seal
that game. Like that was not just like Aaron Rodgers threw it to him. Like that was his technique and his instincts and his knowledge of the game. And like that caused that interception. Then there was a play against Detroit where he like fell down, and there was no contact. He just kind of, I don't know if it was, he was basically lined up across from his guy on the line of scrimmage, and the guy made like not like an A+ move, but made a move, and he just went down, and the guy, was wide open for a touchdown as a result. And so, a lot of cornerbacks can fall, and like this was, I don't think that was like, indicative of him, falling off a cliff, but like he's a starting caliber cornerback, but if you thought he was going to come in here and be a lockdown guy, like I think that was a lot to put on him.
My plan, Gaardsy, is to go to 27, but let's take this opportunity to try to put $1,000 in somebody's hand right now.
The Fan and 2 men and a junk truck want to do that. It's our national cash contest, and the second keyword of the afternoon is dollar. Go to KFAN.com and enter the keyword dollar.
Interesting, to broaden out the discussion, this comes in from formerly South Chicago guy. Here's what he writes regarding the easiest Hail Mary completion in the history of Hail Marys, Bears, Washington. More than one holding penalty speculated while Jaden Daniels ran around before the Hail Mary. Swallow whistles on final plays. So there's a lot of discussion about that. That, in effect, both offense and defense on Hail Marys can get away with whatever. They're never going to call pass interference in the end zone, even if you mug one of the would-be receivers in the scrum. And does the same apply for if you're trying to protect the quarterback, give him time to get the throw off? They're not going to call that holding penalty either?
Yeah, and you haven't seen as many teams lean into that, but that certainly was the case the other night. There was even another block that looked like it was a blindside block.
Oh, I didn't see that.
Because, the quarterback's running all over the place, and that causes chaos. And so a guy went to go block a Bears pass rusher, and it looked like he blocked him like from the side or from behind, what you're not supposed to. And you saw a guy just go flying through the air.
How stunning would that have been if that play would have been called back for that penalty? You can't even make that up.
Yeah, and the other thing, it's not just defensive passing, offense. You can push off. You better push off when you're trying to catch the ball. You can, so you might as well.
Yep.
And I would, if I were a coach, and I'm sure they do, their green light to do whatever, holding, grabbing, knocking down of people you can in that scrum. I thought you were going to say that there's a rule against calling unnecessary roughness on a face mask near the end of a game as well, but I guess it's just on Hail Marys.
What was that one? Which one are you talking about?
Sam Darnold.
Oh, the Darnold one, yeah. Yeah, you're still bitter about that.
Well, it was a bad
difficult.
look. It's a bad look.
It's definitely a bad look, and it seemed impossible. It seemed impossible to miss. I've submitted yesterday that I don't even think you can call that a miracle, because if the same 5 defensive atrocities were committed the next time, I think it would be just as likely that it would be a touchdown pass for Washington. And the game, given the number of blunders, and you put them together, that was not that hard of a play. A play that's supposed to be hard actually was quite simple for Washington.
When there is a guy wide open, or a guy without anybody within 2 or 3 yards of you in the end zone on a 70-yard throw, then that's pretty dang easy to finish off that play. And so we all know that there's a reason that guy was open. The person who was supposed to be boxing him out was completely space cadet and didn't know the play had started. My favorite view of that play was the one that captured the Bears fans who were sitting in the front row in the end zone, who were pointing, telling them, "Hey, look, go! The play is on."
That's the best part.
As only an aggrieved Bears fan could probably do. Yeah. And then they finally got his attention. He ran in there, and so that was my favorite part. But yes, that was. I said it at the moment, that's the easiest Hail Mary catch you'll ever see.
Yeah, you all. I mean, I'm sure there have been a couple. Well, we played one yesterday. The Gophers had one almost as easy. Against Northwestern, where it was even better orchestrated by the scoring team, by the Wildcats, in that one of the receivers clearly, off to the side, near the sidelines, waits for the ball and taps it towards the end zone to a receiver who's waiting, who's now coming towards the goal line, and that was also relatively easy. But this one is, like I said, this is the easiest that you're ever going to find.
Well, the other easy one that I immediately came to mind was Kyle Rudolph for the Vikings had one, I think, against the Lions.
Oh, really?
Right before halftime. And if you remember, Kyle Rudolph's 6'6".
Yeah, big guy.
These super long arms. So basically, Cousins just puts it up, and everybody's grabbing for it, but he's just taller and longer than everybody else. And so the ball settles into his hands before anybody else.
And he grabs it. By the way, Bradshaw and Brian KFAN text line is open, 646-86. Where was I going to go next? Oh, can you ask the rules expert in studio? Man,
oh, no.
It almost sounds sarcastic.
Jeez.
Oh, no, he maybe means it literally.
A lot of pressure.
Why the Bears were not called offside when the 12th man was on the field and the Commanders took a false start penalty. The announcers only never mentioned the Bears were offside on the snap, because I think I can answer that.
Okay.
The way they explained it is, the false start happened first before the ball was snapped. Therefore, if there's a false start, that negates the fact that the 12th Bears defender was not yet off the field.
That's true. The false start means there's no play. And so whatever happened after that is not relevant.
The holding every time Goff dropped back against the Vikings was worse than anything on that last Bears play. You don't remember that, do you?
The holding.
Apparently the Lions, the offensive line, they were holding a lot. Is that true?
Oh, against the... Well, yeah. I don't remember seeing that as being egregious, but they did get called for holding several times. I do know that.
They did. That's true. You're right in that game. I had a good, I should have started, because this was here it is. This is from Ben. Do we look tired or old on D, or did we just face two quarterbacks who are good at getting the ball out quicker than anybody else? That was Jonathan Grenard's point this morning on the power trip. And then we just need to finish on the few chances we get on those QBs, but the opportunities are less with Goff and Stafford. The problem with that is then you have to, at some point, address the weakness to an extent, don't you? I mean, you can't just say, well, those guys are good at doing it, because presumably when you get to the playoffs, you're going to be playing better quarterbacks, right? So they have to, it can't just be, well, those guys are, well, no, you just, you congratulate them. You put your hands in the air and say, God bless you.
That does seem to be the theme, though. I asked Flores, if there were any common threads to, in the Stafford game at least, why they were unable to get pressure. And he said, well, you tip your cap to Sean McVay. He's one of the best coaches and best schemers. And, maybe there's something we could have done, to make things on one or two plays a little bit harder, but that's on. And Flores said that's on me, and I'll take the blame for that. But sometimes you just have to. So either he doesn't, either they are just tipping their cap to a team and a coach and a quarterback who just outperform them, or he's just not willing to publicly, say the real reasons.
On the trade front, beyond left tackle. You think there's stuff out there? You think there's stuff percolating that might include a fairly sizable move by the Purple or not?
Not out of the question. It's funny, like the big theme of this trade deadline already is receivers, and that's the last position the Vikings probably need to add or want to add. And so, while I think that it's possible to look ahead and say, like, can we get ahead on free agency by making the kind of trade for like a 25-year-old that hasn't hasn't had a second contract yet, and with a team like Carolina or somebody else who's Cleveland or that's in pure, sell-off mode. And I guess that's possible, but as we've said, the capital they have to give up is limited.
Interior defensive line?
Potentially. Those guys are playing a lot of snaps, and they're all veterans, and they did the same thing last year, and there wasn't a lot behind them as well. They do have some young players, Jalen Redmond and Taki Takayami, who they have been playing some, and that's rare. Like Brian Flores doesn't play rookies just to play them, as we can see with Dallas Turner. And so they have his trust, and so maybe those are two guys that can continue to develop as well.
Maybe we trade Addison. So let's move on from this nonsense. We'll free number 3. You asked to be freed. We're going to free it.
Sure. Well, then in that case, you just cut him, right?
Well,
that's the way to free him.
That's very true.
I don't think that's happening.
There was it a corner that Gessling had a Sunday story on this whole subject.
Yeah.
Thought it was a Carolina corner.
Well, I think like Matthew Collar, the Purple Insider, started, just with his own personal idea was that, hey, a guy like J.C. Horn.
That's it. That's the guy.
From Carolina who fits the bill that we were just talking about.
And is going to help you in theory for more than just this upcoming season. Yes.
Relatively highly regarded cornerback who was a high draft pick. Joe Horn's son, if you remember Joe Horn, the receiver.
I do, sadly.
And but there's also no indication that other than the fact the Panthers appear to be in sell-off mode, that's one of the players. Like if I'm the Panthers, that's a guy I want to build around. I don't necessarily want to trade him, but you never know what's going to happen in that organization. So I think that's how that name has kind of become at least sort of a metaphor for the type of player the Vikings would be potentially trying to upgrade with.
Jeff in Monticello, seems odd there's not more savagery about the play in which Darisaw was injured. Why not take a knee on that play? They took a knee on the following play. Completely unnecessary injury. Your thoughts? Mine are on the record. I think the savagery is ridiculous. I think most teams do what they're going to do, which is we're going to run one play. We think they might be loose on a run. If we get 20 yards, then we're going to keep going. If we get 3 yards, we're going to take a knee. I just, to me, this isn't that complicated.
Yeah.
What do you think?
It's a little bit in an extreme case of where they were almost
inside the 5,
all the way back.
True.
This wasn't like taking over the 25 and then hope if you get a lot of yards in the first play. My friend and former colleague Mike Sando, now at the Athletic, has a way of quickly finding all similar situations and finding out. And he looked at when a team was at the 5 or less and that much time remaining and that much timeouts remaining, what have they done? And they've all kneeled. And so this was
unusual.
Yeah, this was unusual. It fits.
Have you guys presented that to KFC?
No, but I did ask him, like, right after the game, what was, why did you do that? Why didn't you kneel? And he mentioned that, like, he was extremely concerned that somehow the Rams could get another possession out of that. I assume via mistake, via them having to punt or something like that, and then somehow stealing another score before halftime, and then getting the ball to start the third quarter as well. And he didn't want that to happen. But for the most part, he was just like, let's see if we can get Aaron Jones, off. We've seen many times when he pops a 15, 20 yarder, and then we call a timeout, or we have some timeouts left, and then maybe we're going to get a long field goal. They love, they're basically, they think Will Reichard, the rookie kicker, is gold anywhere from like 68 to 70 yards in. And so
free three.
If that's the case, then you only need to get to around midfield and give him a shot. So I think that's what he was thinking. You never, like, of course, if you say, like, if you run this play, Christian Darrisaw is going to, then you don't do, but like, you can't ever think that, like, there was no heightened risk there.
Well, the only thing I read, and I don't know if you agree with this, somebody said it looked like Darrisaw wasn't really participating a little bit, and he was just sort of almost like the way he handled himself, he made himself a target. I tend to think it's broken field in football. I don't think there's any kind of conspiracy there.
He was engaged in the guy he was blocking. He didn't necessarily drive him 10 yards off the ball, and so that's why he was in the backfield or near the line of scrimmage at least, when the guy came in for this diving tackle attempt that he made and ultimately got on Aaron Jones and then went into Darrisaw.
In our final minutes, are you close to conceding the division and saying that the Vikings are still in very good position to make the playoffs, but it ain't going to be for the division?
I mean, right now, there's every reason to think the Lions are going to win it. I'll be interested to watch how this Packers game goes this weekend. But, we don't even know if the Packers have Jordan Love or not. And I know Malik Willis has been good, but like I think we saw firsthand at US Bank how good Detroit is, even without Aiden Hutchinson. And so it's very hard to pick against the Lions right now.
Do you have Halloween's Thursday?
It is.
As most of our audience knows, and I assume you know as well. So at the Seifert house, do you guys establish a maximum age in which if somebody who maybe looks 15 or 16 comes to the door that you say, nope, not going to work, ain't giving you any candy, run along, Junior?
Well, I used to, but then I saw the Curb Your Enthusiasm episode where he turns away these two teenagers and then they toilet paper his house and spray paint his door with profanity. And so I was like, that's not worth it. No. They can have the candy if they
give them
really
whatever they want.
If they make the effort to knock on the door, then they're going to get what they want.
What you don't want to let them do is like take 3 extra handfuls because they feel like they're less shy about that.
Yeah.
But otherwise, I don't. We talked about it earlier. Now there's some municipalities that have laws on this, which just
how old you can be.
Yes, and I'm going, well, what are you going to do? In some cases, one of them was a mask related. That if you're older than 12, you can't wear a mask.
Illinois,
which doesn't make a lot of sense.
Chesapeake, Virginia.
Try that, by the way, in college protests in 2024. See how far you get. To me, it falls under the classification of, we got a lot of things we need laws for. This ain't it. Whatever you think of it personally. And who's going to do the arresting?
Yeah, that's the other way. I'd like to know what the incidents were that caused
the anger?
The anger to rise to the point where some political body decided to make that the law.
My late great father, Jay Barrero, I was in grade school, living in Merrillville, Indiana, just south of Gary, and pumpkin outside the door like most people. Mm-hmm. It's late. It's about 10:30 at night. Somebody rings the bell and then smashes the pumpkin with their foot. The old, pretty basic, but smashes it. I've never seen my father move so fast. Sprinted from the Barca and chased the guy down. Caught the kid, and he nailed him. He caught him. Yeah, he could. In his prime, he could move pretty good. Now, that was a long time ago, like I said. But
you never know what the kid's going to be packing.
That's it. I don't think you can risk that in 2024, nowadays, can you?
No. Or the parent might see you go after him, and then they take matters into their hands.
Correct.
And so it's there's a lot of more risks out there than there used to be.
Sad but true. You had a good Los Angeles experience. You love the arena, right? The stadium?
And I passed by the Clippers' new arena.
Oh,
it's right
you did?
there.
Yeah. Right by the Forum, right?
They both look like spaceships that were intending to land at LAX and just came a little short. SoFi is like built into the ground, so it doesn't really rise up, and so you don't even realize you're there until you get there, and it's kind of like the spaceship from Armageddon or whatever.
It's cool to fly over, too.
Yeah, and you see it and then now I'm blanking on the name of it, but the
Intuit Dome.
Intuit Dome is right there as well, and so right on the corner.
Well, the Forum looks like a little miniature, fabulous Forum compared to those, right? It's like this little miniature thing.
And it's amazing. The Forum is still there.
Still there.
And like they use the parking lot for SoFi, and that's where like the Ubers pick you up and all that, but I don't know what happens inside, if anything, in the Forum.
Concerts.
Oh, okay.
They do a lot of concerts.
Okay, good to know.
Yeah, it's still there, still working.
I think Weird Al's playing there next month.
There you go, your guy, for sure. So Sunday night, Vikings, Colts.
Yeah, I'll be there.
And you're picking the upset, I heard.
Who would be the upset?
The Vikings losing would be the upset,
I'm not
wouldn't
picking them. I think the Vikings win that game.
You think they do win the game? They sort of got a rebound at this point, don't they? That would be tough. You lose the next one.
It's no longer a get-well game or get-better game or get back on the right track game because with Flacco playing, but I really think that they do win this game.
Thanks for coming in. Great stuff as always.
Okay.
Kevin Seifert, ESPN.com. Is the honeymoon over for Karl Anthony Towns in the Big Apple? Is that hyperbole?
What do you mean?
Or is there some truth to it? You familiar with the name Brian Geltzeiler?
No.
Very knowledgeable NBA wonk who, I don't know if this is his full-time job or not. He's on NBA Sirius XM channel a lot.
Okay, yep.
So
I'm going to do the Kessler. Yes, of course. I know exactly who he is.
How about Kessler? How good was Kessler going from, of course I've seen the links, to ask me again? I mean, 9 games? A bunch of games. So ask me again. And by the end of it, he admitted he'd never been.
Never been to a game.
Zach Lowe from last night. Great win for the Cavaliers last night at the Garden. Scoring isn't off the charts or anything, but I've loved Mobley's mentality so far. Blah, 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 blah. To which Geltzeiler writes, alarming thing for New York was how weak Towns was in the paint defensively in the fourth. Allen, that's Jared Allen, and Mobley pushed him around. Now, I can't say I'm surprised because part of the reason I liked the controversial Gobert trade from the beginning, as expensive as it was a belief that it would liberate Cat. That Cat cannot be your primary interior defender. He just can't. And stop pretending he can. And to a certain extent, he would be liberated by no longer having that responsibility just on the basis of his size, right? So right now, the only other big man choice for the New York, he's out injured. His name now escapes me. And
Is that Mitchell Robinson?
Yes. And he thinks it's going to be a while till he's back. So it's harder. The point is, it's a lot easier to hide Towns defensively if you got Rudy next to him. And, we all acknowledge Cat improved defensively, but with a great defensive center next to him. He doesn't have that right now, and it sounds like the honeymoon might be over already.
Yeah,
that's fast.
He was back to...
It's not even November yet.
No, it's not. He was back to... Karl Anthony fouls, as people like to call him here every once in a while, because he fouled out. Because there was a little bit of a stretch where we were all paranoid that he was already getting the big market whistle, that he was driving to the basket and drawing fouls as opposed to just flailing, hitting the ground, yelling, and not getting the call. He was already going to the line more than he was going to the line here. He was finishing games with like 2 fouls, which was almost impossible here. Wasn't there a playoff game where he got a foul immediately on the jump ball on the tip?
That's possible. I don't remember it, but
I feel
he did have it. It was an issue for sure.
And that was maybe his number one issue was foul trouble here.
That's true.
And getting into stupid things and picking up offensive fouls. He had kind of gone away from that. I don't know how many of those fouls last night were offensive, but he fouled out, and that was always a big issue here. Hadn't really happened yet there, I don't think.
I mean, I'm sure they're not quite giving up on the experiment yet.
Probably a little early,
but that is indicative, I think, of the dangers of having him be your main big man. You're asking him to do more. And I think, quite frankly, here, he also got accustomed to not being in that role, which makes it less likely that he can sort of ease back into it effortlessly. Put it that way. Also, real quick, Wolves are 4-0 when our Frisbee dogs play at halftime, Ben writes. We were there Saturday, but not tonight. Nevertheless, I think the Wolves are winning tonight. Edwards and Randall playing well off each other. The team's mojo on the floor is clicking way quicker than I was expecting with all the changes. I'm loving how it looks right now. Rudy's D looked great as well last game. Heard it was going to be an adjustment to play with a true 4 next to him again. Seen the Toronto game, he was locking himself in on defense.
Wolves are 5-point favorites tonight. That
surprised me a little bit, but then the Mavericks played last night. They beat, I think, Utah. So it's the proverbial back-to-back. I don't know if anybody is automatically sitting for this game. I think because Kyrie had big minutes. I think he, by current NBA standards,
36.
I thought it was 40. It's 36. Okay.
Yep.
And then, I thought Luka already was banged up with a couple things because he's one of those guys I think is always going to be banged up. So it will be interesting to see how the Wolves approach it because of that history. To that extent, you'd feel like the game might mean more to the Wolves than Dallas. Ultimately, it's not going to matter what we do against them now. It would matter what we might do in a potential rematch, right? It is another national game. That's why it's early. I think isn't it a 6 o'clock start?
6:30.
6:30 start. And you can hear that game on the Timberwolves channel. The Timberwolves channel. You can also hear your Minnesota Wild. We are in Pittsburgh tonight, correct?
Yes. Last game of the road trip.
Last game of the road trip. A road trip that's gone extremely well for the club to this point. We may get Billy Guerin later this week. Is that the rumor?
We're hoping, yes.
Which is great. Tomorrow is Kessler. Tomorrow is Mike Conley. Is that correct?
Yes, and Glenn Mason.
And Glenn Mason back in studio. So it's could be quite a week, actually. Let's stay on track, stay on schedule. Louie is going to join us from Hawaii to talk plenty of hockey at 5:30.
Time now for the Vikings Report on The Fan, presented by Miller Lite. Vikings safety Cam Bynum joins Barrero next after this from Miller Lite.
Real quick here before we get to Top 5 at 5, Louie is going to join us at about 5:30. We are out at 6 for Minnesota Wild hockey. I think this story broke yesterday. I don't know if there's any new information on it. Ballot boxes in Oregon and Washington were set on fire with incendiary devices early Monday in what authorities believe, this is according to ABC News, are connected incidents. Now, I don't know if they've been further connected since that original report. They are, for all the obvious reasons, concerning. We don't know who would be involved in that sort of chicanery. We all know who, based on the Sharks and Jets world we live in, people want to believe will be involved in that chicanery. But I bring it up because we had a story. This was, I think, was it last week or maybe even it broke the week before, that got, I think, way too scant attention. And I know the reason why, which we'll get to in a minute, that a bushel full of ballots, absentee ballots, were left. Well, I know that's probably not even the proper term anymore, because if you want to vote early, you can vote early, right? Doesn't even have to be.
Are you talking about the Edina thing?
Yes.
Yeah.
So they're left unattended for, I think it was like 7 or 8 minutes. Somebody took a photo of it outside Edina City Hall. And as far as anybody can tell, nothing, the ballots were not at all tampered with. But put me clearly in the camp of people who believe that folks should have been more bothered with this than they were about it, the ramifications of it potentially. And I don't even think this should be partisan, but it became partisan. The only individuals who have expressed anger about it are the Republicans, and so a group of Republicans, including the former Secretary of State, Mary Kiffmeyer. And for that reason, then, in the world of Sharks and Jets in which we live, it's become partisan. And her point was, now, I will say, your guy, Steve Simon, the Secretary of State, did say unacceptable. There were others, I think, working for him who said this was a bad look. We are looking into it. In fact, I think the individual who was driving that vehicle, whatever courier service was being used, was dismissed. Okay. So there was some, I think, of the right reaction to it. But Kiffmeyer asked the question that I think should not be a partisan question. Because Steve Simon says that state election law only requires, the issue that came up was, why is there only one person transporting these ballots, right? And Simon has said that state election law only requires 2 observers from different political parties on election day, not for the entire early voting period. Now, I haven't read the law. Is the law that specific, or is it vague enough that it can be interpreted the way that Simon is interpreting it? To me, that should be handled. But I would add this. Given legitimate concern about the sanctity of any vote, shouldn't matter whether you're a shark or you're a jet. I would argue, and given also that now the greater, with each election, the numbers are through the roof on people voting early, right?
Big time.
I have no problem with people voting early, but it's becoming bigger and bigger numbers. Shouldn't there be better safety measures in place, regardless of whether it's on election day or not? This got almost zero coverage that I saw at my former newspaper, the Star Tribune. And my theory on it is it's because, well, it's partisan. Republicans are pouncing on it. Nothing really happened, so there's nothing to see here. Let me say this as clearly as I can. You do not have to believe that the last election was stolen to have legitimate concerns and questions about what safeguards we have in place, especially in an era in which fewer and fewer people are waiting until election day to get to vote and are doing it sooner. And it's dismaying. It may, again, not be all that surprising. The only outlet that I've seen that's given proper respect to this story is Channel 5. And their big shot political reporter, Tom Hauser. Mm-hmm. And it's a legitimate story that should be covered. And I put this all together because, again, if we have, these aren't apples and oranges to me. If we in Oregon and Washington have ballot boxes that are being set on fire, that's a problem, right? For whatever the motivation of it is, votes we think are very important. And within this state, I don't even know if we have ballot boxes in this state, but I would say whatever rules we have in place, Republicans and Democrats should say, we need to take another look at that. That should never happen. We shouldn't, but we're in a period now. Here's what's ironic. If you go back far enough in history, this was left-wing territory. The idea of protecting the vote, and there's something shaky going on here. Let's be careful. Well, obviously, in the Trump stump the steal era, it became a Republican thing, and it became easy to dismiss because he made stuff up as he went along, as he did on January 6th. But let me again reiterate, just because he's a lunatic on this issue and has lied about it repeatedly doesn't mean the issue itself should not be handled and discussed. And I'd like to think in a perfect world, Republicans and Democrats would say, yeah, that's not a good look. If we think, how many ads do we have these days about the importance of voting in this election? They're everywhere now. Let your voice be heard, as Red McCombs used to say.
That's right.
Remember back in the day?
How could I forget?
And it is important. So every safeguard should be in place. And if there's some vagueness or it's a little bit unclear the way Simon, or even if Simon's interpreting it properly, that there's no need to have more than a courier service that leaves their back hatch, door open, I would say, let's close those loopholes. Let's be diligent. Let's respect the sanctity of the vote. Again, you do not have to believe there's any evidence that elections are being routinely stolen to still have some vigilance, right? Can't we do both?
It should be pretty simple.
But we're not allowed to do both, because if you do that, well then, you must think you think the last election got stolen, right? That Trump won. No, has nothing to do with the concern. But the lack of interest in that story, to me, falls into that classification. It definitely deserved more attention than it did. And again, in fairness, it looks as if the powers that be, when it came to their attention, they were vigilant. They spoke very quickly about this. I think it was called inexcusable. This can't happen. We're going to do everything I can to make sure it doesn't happen again. I'm not saying they gave it short shrift, like it was no big deal. But that's still not the same as saying, oh, there goes the Republicans. They're going to make, Kiffmeyer's going to make a big deal of this. The questions she's raising to me are perfectly legitimate. Perfectly. I don't think that should necessarily be a radical stand at all.
Should not be controversial.
No, I don't think so. What do we have for top 5?
Indianapolis Colts news heading into the Sunday night showdown at U.S. Bank Stadium. Wolves, big one tonight at Target Center.
You're
big
going?
one. I'm not.
Oh.
I'd like to, but I'm not. Flower says farewell to Pittsburgh.
Emotional.
Perhaps tonight. And are the Brooms, will they be brought out in the Bronx this evening?